Leafs news, and I'm actually going to try to explain it because it's hard to explain. Because when there's assistant coach news, you're like, okay, great. What am I supposed to care? What does it mean? Explain! Okay, I'm going to try. The Toronto Maple Leafs have hired former New York Islanders head coach Lane Lambert to be an associate coach with the team, and in the process, they have parted ways with assistant coach Dean Chynoweth. So let's start there. Dean Chynoweth. He's the guy who I've called Dean Chynoweth for all this time, and just recently learned that I'm wrong. Now, if you're like, Dean Chynoweth, where have I heard that name before? He's the guy who we recently talked about on the podcast because someone thought he was Adam because of a photo taken of him with Austin Matthews at a restaurant. It was not Adam, it was Dean. And here you are sitting there going, I don't know if that's good, and I don't know if that's bad. Here's what I can tell you. When the Leafs got Dean Chynoweth, it was from the Carolina Hurricanes, and he had a pretty decent resume. But things have changed in Toronto, and maybe it's time for a change for both parties here. If you want to know what Dean Chynoweth did, Nick Barden from thehockeynews.com and also Marley Minute here on this YouTube channel wrote this. With a new associate coach coming in, Maple Leafs assistant Dean Chynoweth departs. He joined Toronto from the Carolina Hurricanes in 2021 and has been responsible for the team's penalty kill since Mike Van Ryn joined the organization last summer and took over the defense. So the fact that Chynoweth was basically replaced by Mike Van Ryn managing the defense, that doesn't necessarily mean he stunk. It just meant that the Leafs wanted a different look. Like Manny Malhotra joined the Leafs several years ago, and he famously ran the power play, and a lot of people didn't like it. And even though the Leafs had other people managing the power play over the ensuing years, they kept Manny Malhotra until actually just about a month ago when he left to join the Canucks organization. So I guess the big question, hey, how was the penalty kill? Don't worry, I got you. Bad. Leafs were tied for the 23rd ranked penalty kill in the NHL. Actually tied for 22nd and tied for second worst among teams to make the playoffs. Tied with Nashville. Somehow the Islanders, who made the playoffs, had the worst penalty kill in the league. And you might be going, wait, didn't you just say the Leafs just got the guy from the Islanders? Should we be concerned? My answer is fair point, but probably not. And that's not me being a Leafs homer either. This is numbers. So here's the thing. Lane Lambert, you probably don't know much about him, other than he looks like a guy who doesn't take any guff. Look at this. Do you think he's taking your guff? He's not taking your guff. This dude has never seen guff. He wouldn't even have anywhere to put it. I think it's really interesting that the Leafs hired Lane Lambert because of a discussion that we've had in recent videos. And if you haven't seen my video about Craig Berube getting hired or Sheldon Keefe going to the New Jersey Devils, let me explain. Funny enough, with Craig Berube, Sheldon Keefe, and Lane Lambert, you have three completely different coaches in terms of their resume. You have Sheldon Keefe, who's a head coach and has been a head coach basically his entire coaching career. He was a head coach with the Pembroke Lumber Kings. He was a head coach with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds. He was a head coach with the Toronto Marlies, and he was a head coach with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Very little experience as an assistant or associate. Craig Berube has been all over the map. Assistant in the A, head coach in the A, assistant in the NHL for a number of years, and then a head coach in the NHL. Then there's Lane Lambert, who just got his first head coaching job in the National Hockey League 2 years ago. Oh, wow, the Leafs got a real up-and-comer. Yeah, except for the fact that he's going to turn 60 years old on November 18th of this upcoming season. Wait, so he's approaching 60 years old. He just got his first NHL head coach job and it didn't go well? That must mean he's bad. Well, yeah, I mean, if you consider being a part of a Stanley Cup winning team bad, and a team that made it to the Final Four twice and only got beaten by the eventual Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning, and a team that's won the President's Trophy. Lane Lambert was an assistant coach with the Moose Jaw Warriors of the WHL for a season and a half, and then he was the head coach of the Prince George Cougars for a season and a half. Assistant in the AHL for 2 seasons, 1 with the Bridgeport Sound Tigers and 2 with the Milwaukee Admirals. And he became the head coach of the Milwaukee Admirals for 4 years. And you would think that would lead to a long career as an NHL head coach. Nope. Long career in the NHL, just not as a head coach. For 11 straight seasons, Lane Lambert was either an assistant or an associate coach in the NHL with the Nashville Predators, Washington Capitals, and New York Islanders. One thing that should stick out to you right away, okay, he started the 11-12 season with the Nashville Predators, then the 14-15 season with the Washington Capitals, and then the 2018-19 season with the New York Islanders. Oh, he was an assistant under Barry Trotz for like almost that whole time. To be honest, I'm a little surprised he didn't end up back in Nashville, but Trotz isn't behind the bench anymore. He is upstairs. Let's just look at the numbers for the teams that Lambert had as an associate or an assistant coach for the last 2 teams he's been with. The Predators, like, he hasn't been with them in 10 years. But the Capitals and Islanders, while Lambert's been there, were incredible. Especially on the defensive end and especially on the penalty kill. Lane Lambert's tenure with the Washington Capitals spanned from the 2014-15 season to the 17-18 season, the year the Capitals won the Stanley Cup. Over the course of those years with the Capitals were the second best team in the entire NHL in terms of goals against. They allowed the second fewest goals against. They had the 6th fewest shots against, and they had the 6th ranked penalty kill. Over that span, they were also 4th in terms of goals for. Put an asterisk on it, though, because one of the teams ahead of them is the Vegas Golden Knights, who only played 1 season over that span. So you could argue they were 3rd. 3rd amongst teams that played all the games anyway. Shots for, 24th, which I found alarming, but okay. But here, this will make you feel better. In terms of wins, they were 1st over that span by a margin of 13 wins over the second best team. And in terms of points, they were 1st by a margin of 26. Oh, and they won the President's Trophy in 2017 and then the Stanley Cup in 2018. The Capitals were quite good when Lane Lambert was there. Yeah, all right, well, that's the Capitals. What about the Islanders? What about the Islanders? I know a lot of Islanders fans don't love Lane Lambert because of how he was as a head coach, or rather how his tenure went, and then he was fired for Patrick Roy. And wow, that's a really interesting name. Holy crap, Patrick Roy. And then they did better, and they made the playoffs, and why wouldn't they like Patrick Roy? And why wouldn't they think Lane Lambert is the problem? Well, the reason I brought up Berube having all this experience, throughout the bench, and Sheldon Keefe being a head coach guy who's always a head coach, maybe Lane Lambert is just a really, really, really good sidekick. Like, maybe he's just a really, really, really good assistant or associate coach. Proof is in the pudding. He's won a bunch of games. He's got a Stanley Cup. Maybe he's just not meant to be a head coach. Almost feels unfair. He's only had a season and a half at it with a team that was mid. Let's be honest, they were mid. Here's how the New York Islanders performed between the 2018-19 season and the 2021-22 season. That's when Lane Lambert was an associate coach. Goals against across the entire NHL, 2nd. Shots against across the entire NHL, 7th. Penalty kill across the entire NHL, 5th. Goals and shots for are tough. 24th in terms of goals for, 18th in terms of shots for. Wins, 16th. And of course, 2 Final Four appearances where they played lockdown hockey, only to be eliminated by the 2020 and 2021 Tampa Bay Lightning, who no one was going to beat. And the New York Islanders probably gave them the best run for their money. They could have won at least 1 cup, maybe even back-to-back cups, had that not been the team in their way. So here's what I see there. Lane Lambert teams usually have a good penalty kill. Lane Lambert teams usually don't allow a lot of shots against. Lane Lambert teams don't give up a lot of goals. Not when he's the assistant coach and not when he's the associate coach. How did he do as a head coach? I didn't even look it up because that's not his job. Craig Berube is the boss. He is the bench boss. Now, Brad Treliving might have some things to say to him, although that'd be terrifying. And Brendan Shanahan might have some things to say to Brad Treliving. But at the end of the day, the guy who manages the bench is Craig Berube. Over an 11-year sample size of Lane Lambert being an assistant coach or an associate coach in the NHL, he's done very, very well. His teams have not only been good defensively, not given up many shots, not given up many goals, had a good penalty kill, but they've won as well. Like, you might look at that Islanders tenure and be like, yeah, but they were kind of middle of the pack in terms of scoring goals. Did you catch the part when I said they were in the Final Four twice? Leafs haven't been there since 2002. Sign me up! So when they made this signing, I was profoundly unimpressed. And the news actually broke when we were on the podcast, and Adam was like, all right, they got Lane Lambert. Like, who cares? The more I looked into it, the more I was like, you know what? There's good potential here. You know, they got bigger fish to fry, obviously. Is their captain getting traded? Is Mitch Marner getting traded? Who's getting traded? Who's getting signed? Who's getting re-signed? Who's going to be on the team? That answer is going to look a little more clear in about a month. For now, they have one of the top free agent head coaches signed in Craig Berube, and one of the top free agent assistant or associate coaches available. One of the top other guys on the bench available in Lane Lambert. One of the things I keep bringing up in terms of a huge gap that needs to be filled on the Toronto Maple Leafs is a really good right-handed shot defenseman. It's not just a gap in terms of, hey, that'd be nice to have. It's a gap in terms of players that these coaches have had over the years. Craig Berube won a Stanley Cup. Well, yeah, he did. With Alex Pietrangelo. The Leafs don't have anyone close to that. Ask yourself, who's their top right-handed defenseman? It's Liljegren, who's an RFA, or Lyubushkin, who's a UFA. If you said Connor Timmins, shut the video off. When Lane Lambert was with the Nashville Predators, he had Shea Weber and he had PK Subban. When he was with the Washington Capitals, he had John Carlson. When he was with the New York Islanders, very early in his career, but you know who he had? Noah Dobson. Those teams that went to the Final Four, Ryan Pulock, Devon Taves. I know Taves is left-handed, shut up. The point is they need better personnel to go with the coach as well, because these guys aren't miracle workers. If you put Craig Berube and Lane Lambert on the bench of your beer league team, you are not winning the Stanley Cup. So, good signing. I like this signing. There's more work to be done. But it's early June. Let me know, what do you think of the signing? Leave a comment in the comment box down below. But for now, that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell all your friends. Steve missed you. You don't have to, because I'm going to be streaming every game of the Stanley Cup Final on the SDPN YouTube channel. Head on over to SDPN. And I just realized I should probably promote the fact that I'm doing Cup Check as well, which is LFR style video after every Stanley Cup Final game. Baby brain.